leader who can't contain their own emotional states ends up exporting them onto the team, the family, the community, the institutions they're part of. The anxiety that can't be held becomes the culture's anxiety. The unprocessed anger becomes that society's anger, or at least the room's tension before anyone even understands what's happening. Low self-strength doesn't stay private. It has a radius and radiates outward. And the more authority you carry, the wider that radius gets.
Welcome to Beyond Success, the podcast for high achievers seeking deeper meaning, fulfillment, and purpose. Now, here's your host, world-renowned leadership coach and therapist, David Tian, PhD.
Picture a man at a kitchen table on a Tuesday morning. The house is quiet, his coffee's still hot. He built a business, he hit his financial targets, and then some. He's married, his kids are healthy, and his house is exactly the kind of house he used to point at and say, "One day, that'll be mine." But he's sitting there, and he feels nothing. Not numb exactly, more like the signal is present, but the receiver is broken. He can see the life he built. He knows intellectually that it's good. The thought arrives, registers briefly, and then disappears without leaving a mark. He's tried to solve it the way he solves everything else. Took a vacation when he thought it was burnout. Changed the business model when that wasn't it. He's a thorough man, systematic, relentless. He doesn't leave problems unsolved. But this one won't move. And what's strange is that everything his intelligence touched actually worked. The strategies worked. The plans played out. His intelligence is not the problem. It's also not the thing that can fix this. This episode is about that gap. What an intelligent mind can build and what an intelligent mind can actually feel. That gap is predictable once you understand what produced it. You are, by most measures, high-functioning. This is not meant to be a compliment. It's a description and a diagnosis. High-functioning people carry a specific vulnerability. They're so good at solving problems that they can go years, sometimes decades, solving the wrong ones. Like if the career stalls, they retool. If the relationship frays, then they work on it or leave. If the body breaks down, they fix the diet, hire the trainer, get a longevity coach. Their approach is relentless and often effective, and they call that a life. But meaning doesn't compound the way achievement does. You can add accomplishments indefinitely, and the sum doesn't change how deeply you feel them. At some point, the returns stop arriving, and you're left holding a very impressive spreadsheet of a life that doesn't feel like much from the inside. The culture that produced you trained you to optimize. From the time you were old enough to be evaluated, which was very young, the feedback you received was for output, results, competence. And you were good at that, so you just kept going. What the culture could not train you for, because it doesn't value it, and barely even has a language for it, is what I'm going to call self-strength. Self-strength is not emotional intelligence. It's not self-awareness, though that can be a part of it. It's not resilience in the motivational poster sense. It's something much more foundational. Self-strength is the capacity to stay fully present inside difficult experience, to feel what's actually happening without needing to immediately manage it or fix it or make it mean something more comfortable. Every system around you rewarded intelligence and effort. Self-strength wasn't on the test. The people who need it most are usually the last to know that they're missing it. So let's first address the myth that got you to this point. That myth is this: if you're smart enough, self-aware enough, emotionally literate enough, you can think your way through anything, reason your way to a good life. If something isn't working, the answer is more analysis, better frameworks, deeper understanding. It's a seductive idea. It's also wrong in a way that can cost people years or decades of their lives. Intelligence models reality. It takes the world and converts it into a map. Predictions, patterns, probabilities. And this map is, of course, genuinely useful. But the map is not the territory. And when reality diverges from this map, when the diagnosis arrives, or when the marriage starts coming apart, or when the company you built stops meaning much to you anymore, your intelligence doesn't go quiet and then let you feel it. Your intelligence generates solutions. It keeps optimizing for control in a situation that requires emotional presence. And those are not the same thing. And here's the part that might be even harder to hear. Smart people are often the most stuck, not despite their intelligence, but because of it. A less analytical person, when something breaks open with it. They cry, they rage, they fall apart in undignified ways. And then, often, they can have the opportunity to move through it. A smart person constructs an elaborate theory about why they're fine. Sit with that before I move on. You probably know someone who has read every book on grief, the stages, the neuroscience, the somatic implications, and still cannot actually grieve. Or the person who can explain attachment theory fluently, identify anxious versus avoidant patterns with clinical precision, and still cannot stop texting someone they really like or are needy towards at 2 a.m, who they know is bad for them. The insight is real, but it actually changes nothing in reality. This is not a failure of intelligence. That's intelligence doing exactly what it does, modeling the problem, building the map. But it's in a situation that requires something that map cannot provide. Intelligence without self-strength is a high-powered engine with no steering. The question isn't whether reason is valuable. Of course it is. The question is what reason alone cannot do. And that boundary, the edge of what the mind can reach, is where this conversation actually begins. So let's look even closer at what self-strength actually is. And let's start with actually what it isn't, because the wrong definition will send you in the wrong direction. Self-strength is not toughness. It's not simply the ability to feel less or to push through by shutting down. That's a different thing entirely. And honestly, most high-functioning people already have too much of that. The capacity to suppress or to compartmentalize, to stay in motion while something is invisibly breaking, that's not a deficit for this achiever audience. That's like the baseline. Okay, that's what got you here to this point. Self-strength is something different. It's the capacity to stay fully present inside challenging or difficult experience, to feel it without being erased by it, to stay in the room with it as it is, without immediately escaping into analysis or action, and then, and this is the part that matters most, to act freely rather than reactively. There's a metaphor that might help here. A river moving around a stone. The river doesn't resist the stone. It doesn't stop. It doesn't harden against it. It doesn't pretend the stone isn't there. It moves around it, through it, keeps moving. The stone is real. The contact is real. The river is changed by it, at least a little. There's turbulence. There's redirection. And then the river continues, because that's what rivers do. Self-strength is that kind of quality, the ability to be moved without being swept away, to make contact with what's actually happening and remain, fundamentally, yourself. Now, I want to give you something even more concrete, functional descriptions of what high self-strength actually looks like in a person's life, in real situations, not just in the abstract. Okay, so here's the first one. You can feel afraid and still lead. Fear arrives, and it will arrive. That doesn't change because there's always danger. But it doesn't immobilize you. Fear doesn't make the decision for you. You feel it as information about the situation, not as a verdict about your capacity to act. The fear is present, and you lead anyway, not by suppressing the fear, but by not handing it the controls. Here's the second. You can feel uncertain and still decide. This one is particularly relevant for anyone in a leadership role because the people around you need your steadiness even when, or especially when, you don't have all the answers. Low self-strength means uncertainty becomes contagious and overwhelming. You can't hold it, so it leaks and breaks through. High self-strength means you can carry genuine not knowing without transmitting it as panic. You stay grounded in the uncertainty rather than performing a confidence that you don't have. Here's the third. You can feel desire and not be governed by it. Desire becomes information rather than a command. This is a really important, significant distinction. The desire is real. You don't pretend that it isn't. But there's enough space between the feeling and the action that you can ask whether acting on it serves you, serves the people you're responsible to, serves the life you're actually trying to build. And that space, that pause, is not suppression, it's in fact freedom. Without it, desire runs the show, and then you rationalize it after the fact. Here's a fourth, and it's the last one I'm going to present here. You can hold opposing feelings at the same time. Anger and love simultaneously for the same person. Grief and gratitude in the same moment about the same loss. The desire to leave and the desire to stay, both fully present and both real. Low self-strength means that this tension is intolerable. You collapse it by acting on whichever feeling is loudest in that moment, which is not a choice. It's like a discharge. High self-strength means you can sit inside the paradox long enough to actually choose, rather than just react. Sometimes the real problem isn't more effort or more motivation. It's knowing the right direction. A lot of people listening to this podcast are capable and driven. Things still look fine on paper, but life still feels strangely flat. When that happens, more advice usually isn't the answer. Clarity is. I've put together a short assessment that takes about 2 minutes. It's simply a way to see which area deserves your attention most right now, whether that's relationships, decision-making, or how pressure is being handled day to day. Based on your responses, you'll be sent a short set of masterclasses related to that area. If that sounds useful, you can find it at dtphd.com/quiz. That's dtphd.com/quiz. None of these are personality traits. They're capacities. That distinction matters a lot. A trait is something you have or don't have. A capacity is something you can build. And none of them can be produced by intelligence alone. Not by more reading, not by better frameworks, not by sharper self-analysis. One more thing worth saying here, briefly. This isn't only a personal individual matter. A leader who can't contain their own emotional states ends up exporting them onto the team, the family, the community, the institutions they're part of. The anxiety that can't be held becomes the culture's anxiety. The unprocessed anger becomes that society's anger, or at least the room's tension before anyone even understands what's happening. Low self-strength doesn't stay private. It has a radius and radiates outward. And the more authority you carry, the wider that radius gets. So, what does low self-strength actually look like in a person's life on a regular Tuesday in the middle of a normal week? Just like I presented 4 descriptions of high self-strength, I'm going to describe 4 patterns of low self-strength, plainly and without clinical language or pathologizing. So the first is fixation. This is when the mind locks onto something, a threat, a slight, and uncertainty, and then can't release it. Not because the threat is actually urgent, and not because thinking about it longer will produce a better outcome or anything, but because the nervous system doesn't know how to come back down from that high alert. So it keeps running this loop. The email that hasn't been answered, the comment that landed in the wrong way at dinner 3 days ago, the deal that might fall through, the mind keeps returning to it, not productively and not analytically, just circling, like a dog that can't stop checking the same spot on the floor. The content changes, but the loop is always running, and the person inside it is exhausted in a way that they can't quite explain because nothing obviously dramatic has happened on the outside. The second is externalized regulation. This one is hard to admit. The person needs something outside themselves in order to feel okay, and not just occasionally, but as the baseline. Like a drink at the end of the day that isn't really about relaxing. A number on a screen, like revenue, followers, a bank balance, checked first thing in the morning because without it, the day feels unmoored. A message from a specific person, and until it arrives, there's a low-grade anxiety, a kind of static that makes it hard to focus on anything else. The external thing isn't the actual problem. The problem is that without it, okay isn't available purely from the inside. The regulatory system has been outsourced, and the person usually doesn't notice until the external thing is taken away. Okay, here's a third. Compulsive reassurance seeking. There's a real difference between asking for input and asking for relief. Input is, hey, what do you think about this decision? Relief is, tell me again that I'm not a bad person, or tell me again that we're fine, or tell me again that the business is going to work. Relief seeking looks like input seeking, but obviously it isn't. And on the surface, generally, the person who's relief-seeking won't use those exact words because they're too obvious. The person isn't actually, though, trying to gather information. What they're really trying to do is discharge their own anxiety. And this poisons relationships slowly or gradually because there's no amount of reassurance that will actually satisfy or hold. And this doesn't accumulate. The next morning or the next hard moment, that obsessive need is back, and the other person is being asked again to fill it again. Eventually, the other person runs out, and that's when the relationship starts breaking down in ways that are hard to trace back to that original single cause. The fourth and final one I'll look at is the inability to hold contradiction without acting out. Two feelings are present at once, like, I love her and I resent her, or I want this and I'm terrified of it, or I'm proud of what I've built and I'd burn it down if I could. The tension between them is real and it's uncomfortable, and low self-strength means that that discomfort cannot be held for long. So the person collapses it. They act on whichever feeling is loudest in that moment. They send the message, or they make that call, or they pick the fight, or they make that decision, and then they call it a rational, measured choice. But it isn't a choice. It's simply a discharge. The tension's gone, for that moment, briefly, temporarily, and something has been set in motion that may take months to undo. None of this makes you a bad person. I want to be clear about that. Every one of these patterns is human and understandable and common enough that you'd struggle to find someone who doesn't recognize at least one of them. But if you're in a position of authority, as a parent, as a founder, as a partner, or a leader of any kind, these patterns don't just stay personal or individual to you. Your nervous system becomes someone else's problem. They're contagious, these emotions and these thoughts. Not because you're careless, but because that's just how proximity works. That's how the human brain has evolved. The people closest to you are inside your radius, whether they choose to be so or not. So let me pull back for a moment and say plainly what this episode has argued. Intelligence models or maps reality. Self-strength holds you inside it. Without self-strength, capable people get hijacked by fixation, by the need for external regulation, by compulsive reassurance seeking, by the inability to sit inside paradox long enough to actually choose. With self-strength, you can feel what's true and still act freely. What I want to share with you now is something I haven't shared publicly before. I'm going to share it because it's the most honest illustration I have of the difference between knowing something and being able to use it. Self-strength is not taught, not in schools, not in business training, not in most families. You can acquire a PhD in the field and still not have it. I know because I have one, and there was a specific moment in my marriage where all of it, every framework, every insight, every hour of training, reached its limit in about 4 seconds. Many years ago, my wife said something. I don't remember the exact words anymore. What hit me back then wasn't just what she said, but how she said it. The tone, the look on her face, the way I interpreted it, and the way my body responded before I was aware of it. Because it wasn't her voice I was hearing, or her face I was seeing. It was my mother's, way back then. Not literally, of course, but in the nervous system, and in the older part of the brain that doesn't distinguish between then and now. The demand, the edge in it, the implications underneath the words, the painful downstream consequences I would thought of going along with her demands. Everything that had been conditioned in me over decades related to this activated all at once. Defend, protect myself, withdraw, go cold, make myself very correct and very distant and very overbearing. I knew what was happening in the moment. I'd already done years of psychoanalytic work on this by then. And that's the thing. I actually knew in real time that I was triggered. I could name the parts of me that were activated. If I could freeze time, I could tell you the developmental history of the response I was about to have, all the parts related there. The intelligence was fully present and completely informed, but absolutely useless. What I did, and I want to be honest about how small this was, how much effort it cost for how little it looked like from the outside. What I did was I chose to do the opposite of all my instincts, which started with simply taking a deep breath. Reminding myself, not with words exactly, but with something underneath words, that she was not my mother, that I was not a child anymore, that the woman across from me was my wife, and she was frustrated, and she needed me present, not defensive or defended. And then, because my mouth muscles couldn't produce anything vulnerable in that moment, they actually could not. The muscles would not cooperate. So I simply extended my arm across to her and put my hand on hers as gently as I could. And that was it. That was the whole thing. It took everything I had. Intelligence got me to the room. A different capacity entirely got me to reach out and connect in that moment. So here's what I want you to consider. If you don't build this capacity, your life will probably continue to look fine from the outside. The achievements may keep arriving, the revenue, the recognition, the outward markers of a life well constructed. None of that necessarily stops. But the inner life stays stuck. The same arguments with the same people, cycling through the same grooves, because the underlying pattern never gets resolved, never gets touched or addressed properly. The same gap between the life that photographs well and the life that feels like something meaningful, fulfilling from the inside. You can be sophisticated about it. You'll have better and better explanations for why the gap is there. What caused it? What would theoretically close it? The map can get more detailed, but the territory will not change. That gap doesn't close through more intelligence, and it doesn't close through better strategy or harder effort or more refined understanding of your own psychology. Instead, it closes through a different kind of capacity altogether. And that capacity is either being built or it isn't. So I want to end with something simple. The person who develops self-strength doesn't become invulnerable. That's not what's on offer here. And anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. What actually happens is different, and in some ways, stranger. They become more alive to experience, not less. Fear becomes information rather than freezing. Uncertainty becomes the texture of genuine engagement with the world rather than a problem to be eliminated before you can act. Desire becomes a guide rather than a governor. The episodes ahead will go deeper into how this actually gets built, what it requires, what gets in the way, what it looks like in practice for someone with your particular history and your particular life. But for now, I just want you to know what you're building toward. It's not a harder version of what you already are. It's not more discipline or more analysis or more relentless optimization of the self. It's actually something different, a different relationship to your own experience, to fear, to uncertainty, to desire, to the contradictions and paradoxes that don't resolve. And it is available. That's the thing I most want you to take from this episode. Not a concept, but the real possibility for real persons sitting wherever you're sitting right now. It's available.